and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. I had a very busy day, but I've got some stuff done, and I've got 2 movies I want to talk to you about. It's Science Fiction Saturday, but I'm stretching the point and making it about fantasy films as well. Though one of them you can argue is kind of scientific. And I picked these 2 movies and I decided I was going to talk about them and went through all of the research and the notes. And then I found out, there is a thematic link between the 2 of these movies. And the thematic link is this. They both have immortal women in them who are total nutcases. And so synchronicity worked. Serendipitous discovery worked. So let's get started with 1935. 1935 was really big for Lost World movies. You had Lost Horizon with Ronald Colman, directed by Frank Capra, based on the James Hilton novel. I've talked about that one before. And you've got this one based on a story by H Rider Haggard. It was produced by Miriam C. Cooper, who also made the original King Kong. It's a movie that I find interesting for a number of different reasons. And it's She, from 1935, about an immortal woman who rules a hidden kingdom in the Arctic north of Russia, of all places. It's really interesting for a couple of reasons. The first one is there's both a colorized and a black and white version there. And the colorization of the colorized version was supervised by Ray Harryhausen, who had a spare weekend and decided he was going to do it. And it's also got an introduction on it by Ray Harryhausen. So you can choose to see the colorized version, or you can choose to see the black and white version. Now, the reason it has a colorized version, I'm going to tell you what the movie's about soon. The reason it has a colorized version is that originally RKO were going to make it in beautiful 1930s Technicolor, and then the suits came along and the accountants came along and said, nope, you do it in black and white. Even though you've got everything, including the costumes and everything, ready for a color movie, we're going to make you do it in black and white. And so the guys who made it, and one of the directors was a guy called Irving Bushell, who also played the henchman in Dracula's Daughter in the very same year. They went, okay, we're going to do it. So the story is this. You've got Randolph Scott.
Randolph Scott.
Playing a guy called Leo Vinci, who is the descendant of John Vinci, who 500 years before travelled to a lost kingdom in the Arctic north of Russia. Leo comes back to England from America. He was born in England but was raised in America, which explains Randolph Scott's accent. And he meets his uncle, who has been researching this lost kingdom and the legend that their distant ancestor gave them, of a place there which has a radiation bath kind of immortality. So Leo and a sidekick played by Nigel Bruce, who played Dr. Watson to Basil Rathbone, Sherlock Holmes in the 30s and 40s, head off and go on an expedition to find this place and find a way across a barrier which separates this lost kingdom of Kor from the world. On the way, they pick up a woman played by Helen Mack, who is the daughter of the guy who leads them across the ice fields to where they're going. He unfortunately gets crushed by an avalanche on the way. And they find a few interesting things. They find a man frozen in the ice along with a saber-toothed tiger, which is kind of impressive given the fact there aren't any other ones around. And we never see a saber-tooth during the movie, apart from the one in the ice. The enormous avalanche happens and it opens a gateway into the Lost Kingdom. They travel into a cave system full of volcanic fumaroles which heat up the air and all that kind of thing. They meet a whole bunch of primitive natives who live in the caves. And the natives have this little trick of wanting to grab guests and put a white-hot helmet on them to kill them for no good reason apart from the fact that it looks good in the movie. And then the guards of the Queen of the Kingdom, Hashamotep, played by Helen Gahagan, come in, rescue the people, take them to the Queen. And the Queen is weird. She takes one look at Randolph Scott, who was a good-looking rooster in his day, and has this reaction of screaming really loudly and then revealing herself to be a fairly attractive woman in her 30s. Hashamotep, she who must be obeyed. Hashamotep, she who must be obeyed, decides that Leo is the reincarnation of his ancestor John, whom she has had preserved for 500 years and visits his corpse every day, Now, the steps leading down to his cenotaph are worn smooth by the fact that she's been doing this for 500 years. It takes the crew a little while to figure out that this woman who says she's 500 years old plus is indeed over 500 years old. And in fact, there's an implication from some of the things she says that she was around Nazareth at the time of the birth of Christ. So she is way old. If she was on the pension, she'd be making a fortune. And Hashamotep decides that she is in love with this reincarnation of the man she's been pining for 500 years. Remember how everybody complained about Wonder Woman in Wonder Woman 1985 pining for her boyfriend who died during World War One? This is that taken to 11. This is mad stuff. And the interesting thing is that Helen Gahagan plays the madness of the character in an interesting way. She was a theatrical actress and opera singer. She hadn't made a movie before this one. She gives it a kind of theatrical grandeur and gives you the madness of this woman who's been alive way too long, having bathed in these radiation pool in a hidden place in the kingdom of Kor. I overthought the character entirely. I thought really weird things like, what did she do for the 500 years? What kind of things was she doing apart from ruling the city and the hidden kingdom and scaring everybody into doing what she says, basically by force of personality? What else did she do? Because 500 years is a long time. 5 years is a long time. So did she have hobbies? Did she tend a garden? Did she learn musical instruments and languages? Did she macrame? Who knows? All we know is that she's been the queen for as long as you can imagine, and she's been pining for her lost love for 500 years, which has to be really annoying for all of the people around her, because at some stage somebody must have at least thought, get over it, move on, find something to do. But no, she doesn't, because she's that kind of person. And in one of the costumes she has too, she was the inspiration for Walt Disney's evil queen in Snow White. The costume and the look are exactly the same because Disney stole wherever he could. And the Disney studios, for a very long time, you could argue up until today, really have very little imagination and very little ability to create something that's original. But having said that, Helen Gahagan gives the character a really interesting feel. She has a kind of abstract loneliness about her. She looks like a pre-Raphaelite painting. And she's got this combination of ruthlessness and emotional vulnerability, which Leo tries to play on along with Nigel Bruce and the woman played by Helen Mack. They want to get out, of course, but they also want to find the secret of immortality. Now, the sets in this are fantastic. The Art Deco, they're enormous sets. The matte paintings are beautiful. It's got a really fantastic look about it. And I think that I've seen both copies, the colour and the black and white version. And to be honest with you, I prefer the colorised version, because apart from anything else, there are some really nice costumes there that look better in colour, and the sets look better, and the radiation pool, which they call a flame but it's not really a flame, looks great in colour. So I'm going with the colour version of this. Then of course, she who must be obeyed, Hashamotep, while trying to escape the party happens upon the secret chamber of Hashamotep where the radiation pool is. And Leo is a bit wary about going in there because Hashamotep wants her companion to live forever and wants the other girl, played by Helen Mack, to wither and die of old age. And in fact, she says that. And Leo's a bit wary about this stuff because, you know, radiation is not something to be messed with. And so she goes into it first to show him that it's safe. Only the second dose of radiation makes her age and die. And the party cheeses it out of there and goes back to civilization. Really nice old age makeup in this one as well, where Hashamotep ages as the radiation bombards her. Fantastic look. I love the special effects in this one. They're really well done for 1935. And it's got a really strange feel about it. But there's more. There's two other things I've got to tell you about this movie, which are fantastic. The first one is that RKO, the studio, had a fire in their vault where they held all of the prints of their movies. And she was destroyed. The original prints and the original masters of the movie were destroyed, and it was considered a lost film until Buster Keaton said, hey, I've got one of these in my garage. Buster Keaton had a full version of this film, which he loved, in his garage, which is the print from which all subsequent copies of it, including mine, were struck. So the fact that somebody had a copy of physical media in a time when physical media meant enormous reels of film means that this movie was preserved from a fire. Now, fires in movie studio vaults are not unknown, and there are enormous precautions taken now to protect film stock and to protect the originals of films. That's why digitisation is so important to preserving cinema now. There was also a really big fire in a storage facility in 1978, and a lot of films and a lot of other things were lost at the time. So film preservation is now considered an important thing, and this one might never have existed in this form had it not been for the fact that Buster Keaton believed in physical media. Well, it was the only choice at the time, I suppose. But I love that story. The second thing is, Helen Gahagan was married to the actor Melvyn Douglas, and in the 1940s, for 6 years, she was a member of Congress in the House of Representatives for the 14th District of California. And she really did well. She believed in equal rights for black people. She believed in the rights of women over their bodies. She had all of these beliefs, which people told her were communist at the time, that these days really land well. And you think this woman would sit well in a modern 21st century context as long as she didn't look at Fox News. She was so far ahead of her time politically that it's astounding just to look at her record and see what she did and tried to get done in that brief 6 years. So she went up for re-election, and the guy going against her was a Republican, a slimy little operator called Richard Nixon, and Nixon beat her in 1951. So she withdrew from politics, but she stayed very much active in other parts of politics that didn't involve her being a member of the House of Reps. And then in 1959 and 1960, she was a big supporter of John F. Kennedy and John F. Kennedy's run for president. And she got a lot of Hollywood people that her and her husband knew and got them on board with Kennedy and really pushed for Kennedy and raised funds, did all sorts of things. And Kennedy beat Richard Nixon in 1960. So she got her revenge in a really interesting way. But she was incredibly well known in later years, up until her death in, I think, the 1980s, for being socially progressive at a time when it was dangerous to be that. And so even though she is playing a crazy old lady in this movie, in real life, Helen Gahagan Douglas was an important part of moving America forward in the middle years of the 20th century. And then we get to 1988, and Ken Russell decides he's going to make a movie that's a bit like a Hammer horror film. He'd made The Devils, of course, which you could argue has the little aspects of it which are very much like a Hammer movie. But then he decided in the late 1980s he was going to make a weird comedy, basing it on an obscure Bram Stoker novel, The Lair of the White Worm, which had a couple of up-and-comers in it. Peter Capaldi playing a Scottish archaeologist, Hugh Grant playing James Dampton, the Lord of the Manor, whose ancestor killed an enormous worm snake thing, and that became the local legend, the Dampton Worm, WYRM. And it's also got Amanda Donohoe playing Lady Sylvia Marsh, who is secretly a snake vampire. Yeah, why not? It's the 1980s, you can do anything you like. And so Ken Russell made this mad movie. And it is mad. It is 15 kinds of crazy. The archaeologist, played by young, good-looking Peter Capaldi, finds a skull in the garden of basically a B&B run by a couple of characters, played by Sammy Davis, the actress, not Sammy Davis Jr., the black guy, but Sammy Davis, the actress, and Catherine Oxenbould, who was known for doing American soap operas at the time. So he finds this skull. This skull is of particular interest to Lady Sylvia Marsh, who is an immortal snake vampire chick, who, as a sideline, picks up stray hitchhikers, bites them and drowns them in her bathtub. Because, yeah. So Hugh Grant as the Lord of the Manor and Capaldi as the archaeologist kind of buddy up and decide they're going to investigate what's happening, because the father of the two sisters, played by Sammy Davis and Catherine Oxenbould, had disappeared years before, and his watch has shown up in an enormous cave on the land owned by the rich bastard played by Hugh Grant. So they're trying to investigate this. Meanwhile, Lady Sylvia wants to get the skull back because she can do a spell and make a sacrifice to bring back the Dampton worm, this giant white worm, which for whatever reason she's kind of hooked on. And things get mad from there. That's the setup for it. It's a little bit Hammer horror. It's a little bit Mad Ken Russell, because when people get bitten by Lady Sylvia, they hallucinate immediately and really crazy. There's an hallucination about Jesus on the cross and being monstered by the Dampton worm and people writhing orgiastically around him. There are all these weird kind of hallucination sequences in this movie, which you go, yep, and that's Ken Russell, all right. I can see what he's doing. There's an enormous comedy aspect to this as well. You get to see Hugh Grant cut a snake vampire lady in half with a giant greatsword, which I'm always in favour of. Get a sneaky little role by Stratford John's English character actor playing Dampton's butler, and he's camping it up all over the place as well. And then as they attack the house and try to stop Lady Sylvia, you've got, for reasons, Capaldi with bagpipes, which are used in the same way a snake charmer uses a snake charming flute to ensorcel the snake vampires in the house. And he's dressed up in kilt and sporran and all that kind of thing. He's got all sorts of things in his sporran. He's got a mongoose in there, which he sicks onto Lady Sylvia when she's hiding in the basement, and has Catherine Oxenbold's character hanging by her hands over a pit where the Dampton worm is. And then at a crucial moment, he also has a hand grenade in his sporran. This movie is crazy. This movie is good kinds of crazy. This is very early in the career of Hugh Grant, where he's still playing charming English rich gits, but he knows what kind of movie it is as much as the other actors do. And so the humorous bits, you get him just leaning into them. I mean, I like the fact that Hugh Grant has got this kind of mid-career change these days, where he's playing all sorts of different, really interesting characters. If you take a look at him in Paddington 2 playing Phoenix Buchanan, the over-the-top egotistical actor, he's marvellous in that. He's marvellous playing Greg, the arms dealer, in Operation Fortune Rue de Guerre, which is one of Guy Ritchie's movies. That's an underrated movie, I love it. And now, for A24, he's playing a serial killer who traps a couple of religious women in a maze in an upcoming movie that he's doing there. So he's got this really interesting mid-late career shift into being a really fascinating character actor. So I can forgive Hugh Grant all the stuttering, gormless, good-looking guy comedies he did in the 80s and 90s, because now he's doing some really interesting work. And you can see glimpses of it in the character Dampton that he plays in Lair of the White Worm. And Peter Capaldi is doing great as well. But most of all, Amanda Donohoe, playing Lady Sylvia, is camping and vamping like you would not believe in this movie. And I'm totally there for it. Yes, she does have nude scenes, which I am unashamedly in favour of, and she looks good in them. The weaknesses in this movie are Sammy Davis and Catherine Oxenbold playing the two sisters. They're really not good at what they're doing in this movie, and that's kind of disappointing. They're supposed to be, and it's almost like their characters aren't in on the same joke as everybody else is in this film, and that's a bit unfortunate. I think that their characters, who do get enough in the script to be lived-in kind of characters, just don't get that from the actresses, which is very much a shame. The Lair of the White Worm, I've only got in this fairly old DVD copy, and I really should look to upgrade it at some stage, I suppose. This one's so old that it still has a barcode from the video shop I bought it off when they were selling their used videos. That's how old it is. It's video shop old. But I think I want to get an upgrade to this one because I like it, and I want something in a little bit higher resolution. But these two movies are really fun to watch. They're both silly each in their own way. They're both over the top and absurd each in their own way, but they're both immensely entertaining, and I really enjoyed revisiting them. This is the American copy of this that I managed to find. There are a couple of different versions of it, but this one's pretty good and it's got a few extras in it. I really love Lost World movies, and they can be done really poorly, and in fact they've been done by people like The Asylum in recent years. but I like a good Lost World movie. I like those ones with lizards with pasted on horns pretending to be dinosaurs, and they just film the lizards in slow motion to make them look like dinosaurs on miniature sets. I even like those ones if they've got a little bit of their tongue in the cheek. But these two, with their very different immortal women, are great fun, and a good weekend watch. You can pump them together, stick the disc in the slot, and just have a good night of double featuring these two films. They're each mad, they're each ambitious, and they're each incredibly silly in the best way. So that's it for this time around. Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Tell me which of these two you like better, and if there are any other movies you would add for a triple feature. They were a real lot of fun to watch. You can also support the channel, by the way, by becoming a channel member or by becoming a patron at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies. Next up, I'm reviewing Maxine, the third of Ty West's movies starring Mia Goth after X and Pearl. I saw that today and I've got some things to say about that. Then, during the week, I got two enormous hauls, one from Umbrella and one from Imprint, with some movies you're going to want to have a look at and you're going to want to have copies of. And also a TV series, which is iconic and wonderful, and everybody who watches this video will love. So until I do all of that, and it's a lot of work for me, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies. Don't assume all colorized movies are bad, and I'll catch you next time.